The 2023-2024 ski season started with a surprise storm on Cypress Mountain on October 25th. I then set my eyes on the first ski hill to open in Canada and drove 13 hours straight to sleep in the back of my truck in sub-zero temperatures in order to secure a spot first in line up Mount Norquay on the first chair in Canada. Turns out no one else was as excited as me, but first turns down a bunny hill, I've never felt so glorious. I continued the trend of first chairs at Nikiska, and this is where I started to feel like I was actually doing some real life skiing. I began to remember what my ski edges were and then found myself over at Lake Louise for the opening of the Grizzly Gondola and skied the same run over and over and over again until I got so dizzy I had to drive back to Whistler. I saw a storm rolling in back home, so I drove through the night and arrived back in Whistler for an absolutely ridiculous November storm. The snow had come in so deep that my bases finally didn't kiss a rock. With all this early season skiing, my stomach began to growl, so the best option was to catch a salmon and carry it up a snowy mountain so I could refuel my ski legs. It became very clear to all of you that my skiing abilities were much better than my cooking skill set. Finally, Whistler Blackcomb opened for the season and we began skiing some phenomenal but extremely shallow power runs. As fast as the snow fell, the resort dried up and the dry spell was pretty bad, so it sent the boys hunting for a sick backcountry line, and we found one deep in the Squamish backcountry. Unfortunately, it was becoming very clear to everyone that El Nino wasn't going to play nice and finding snow was going to be somewhat of an issue. I enjoyed the first storm of the season and proved to all of you that skiing actually does burn calories and is a half decent workout. I then met up with Sid for one of the most painful ski tours of my entire life. We did no skiing and climbed up on our ski boots for 9 hours straight without hitting any snow. Finally, the Whistler Alpine opened and I was able to let loose a little bit, all while dodging rocks. I somehow managed to keep surviving the low tide conditions, and Nordica decided to send me a set of prototype enforcers to review in secret. And shortly after, Whistler became a swimming pool and the snow didn't exist. To raise everyone's spirits, I threw on my best Christmas attire and handed out gifts to the naughtiest skiers on Whistler and Blackcomb. I then asked Santa really nicely for snow, and he delivered, and a few days later we had the biggest storm so far of the season, which really turned things on. So I got to ski some powder, ski more powder, and ski even more powder all the way until New Year's Eve. At the start of January, my mom conquered the scariest run of her life by sending it down Sodin Couloir, and I'm still super stoked and proud of her for that. And then we had another mega powder, but this time I didn't want to miss an angle, so I put cameras on all of the boys' helmets, and it turned out awesome, except for the editing part. The POW kept coming down, and it was finally starting to feel like winter again. We adventured up to the most legendary couloir in Whistler, DOA, and skied all the way down from Blackcomb Peak. It was incredible. Temperatures continued to drop, and it got so blistering cold that no one was skiing and the lifts were closing, but we were stupid enough to decide to go out for a ski tour and still managed to find some wicked turns on Cowboy Ridge. The snowpack was still light in Whistler, so I decided it was time to leave on a road trip to find snow elsewhere, and man oh man was that a good decision. I started at a small hidden gem of a mountain called Baldy, just outside of Oliver, BC, and I absolutely loved it. 0 lines and POW skiing all day long. The next stop on my interior loop was Apex, also known to some as Mini Revelstoke, and let me tell you, it really lived up to its name, and I had a kick-ass time skiing tons of vert with the locals. Big White was the next stop, and in proper Biggie fashion, we had great snow, but absolutely no visibility. The next day cleared up real good for me at Silver Star, and the skiing was world-class, bluebird, soft, and fun. And there's no better way to finish an interior loop than with a good old family trip to Sun Peaks. I loved it just as much as I did when I was a kid. Since I'd been riding so many chairlifts, I got in touch with the good old adventure Rob, and he helped me fulfill a lifelong ski fantasy of mine, skiing Frosty Mountain in Manning Park, BC. The adventure did not disappoint. Following our descent down Frosty, I went on a full-on backcountry bender and skied a super skinny couloir in the Blackcomb backcountry called Champ Chute. Then we scored a Bluebird day and decided to try the Stairmaster just across from the Spearhead Glacier and had perfect turns on the opposite side of Spanky's Ladder. Just when we thought the ski season was over, the taps turned on big time and we got 100 centimeters snowfall overnight, which made for some of the deepest skiing of my life and some of the best skiing of the season in the days to follow. But as was the theme of this ski season, the POW party never lasted long, and I was back on the road hunting for more POW before I could blink an eye. I wound up at Castle Mountain, one of the biggest sleeper mountains in Alberta, and made a pit stop to Panorama for some groovy groomer turns. I carved all over Kimberley and finished off with my first ski session at Fernie, where I had decently fresh snow all day long. I had to make it back home though to pick up James and Rob for our annual boys trip, and we headed straight to Revy. We accidentally had one too many beers on the first night, but that didn't stop us from ripping the resort. We couldn't resist the call of Kicking Horse and managed to score a fresh dump before we arrived, making for some insane turns, endless face shots. Of course, the boys had to make me ski the Dutch Wallet again. Banff was calling our names, so we gave Lake Louise a proper pounding before heading to Sunshine Village for some steep skiing on Delirium Dive. The skiing was so good in Banff that it was hard for us to leave, but after a few extra days at Norquay, Sunshine Village, and Lake Louise, we plowed through Panorama on the way home, and things really started to feel like spring. By the time we made it to Fernie, we were in t-shirts and blessed by blue sky skiing down the polar peak. Clothes started to become optional by the time we made it to Red Mountain, and we had one of the goofiest spring days of our entire lives. Of course, the spring taps always turn on at Whistler Blackcomb, and when I arrived home, it was spring POW extravaganza. I just kept forgetting that the snow wasn't all the way to the bottom. Mother Alpine wanted round 2 on the Sodden Couloir, so we did it one more time in much better conditions. And on Blackcomb closing day, I got blessed with the perfect Bluebird POW day and went as hard as I've gone all season to make sure I could ski every line that I missed throughout the core of the season. I was eating too many PBJs at this point. My cardio was getting pretty bad, so I headed out with Dylan to ski Banana Chute for a sick line down Thistle Peak in Whistler. And a few days later, I scored the final April storm of the season. Now May came along and the fun didn't stop. I had a wonderful stealth camp out in Whistler, and then Sid and I decided to go on a mini truck adventure at Mount Cheam to ski the best corn snow of our entire lives. I then revealed to you the truth of what being a ski YouTuber is like and decided to see how many flute bowl laps I could ski in an entire day. Shortly after, I did one of the wackiest things in my entire ski career and attempted to ski from the top of Whistler Mountain all the way to the bottom with absolutely zero snow. The snow was really melting, and the Rise and Alpine family closed down the resort portion of the season with a good old party day in late May. Believe it or not, there's still lots of snow in June in British Columbia, and I got a wicked sunset lap down Cyprus. We then went on a failed ski mission that led us to an abandoned mine, which was pretty spooky, but since I was craving some more real turns, Sid and I climbed a mountain and managed to ski one of the coolest couloirs of the season in June. By the time July rolled around, I had to get real creative and checked off a dream of mine, which is crossing water human-powered to go skiing. I stuck my skis on my inflatable Walmart kayak and navigated the lake in order to get some real slushy and rainy spring turns. The Alpine was still loaded with snow, so as one does, I decided to ski across a river. By August, I had become tired of hiking up mountains with my skis on my back, so I decided it was best to sneak a pair of mini skis up Whistler instead. They worked miserably, but it was a wickedly fun day. Since I needed to truly check off August turns on my list, we decided to create the greatest pond skim of all time, and this was without a doubt one of my favorite ski adventures of the entire summer. I was starting to focus on fishing in September, but I still needed to get my turns in. I found the perfect snow patch, but forgot my actual skis, so I went back a few days later with my skis and skied the same snow patch with a fresh dusting. October is the hardest month of all, and I managed to ski a fresh 4-inch dump in Chilliwack. My bases will never be the same, so thank God it's November. I'm ready to ride the chairlift.